and welcome to part 2 of my How to Get into Grad School series. Last week we talked about letters of recommendation, so if you missed it, definitely go check that out, linked above. And this week we're going to be talking about personal statements and statements of purpose and all that kind of, whatever they want to call it, personal statement type things. So let's get into it. All right, so first I am just going to briefly talk about the difference between a personal statement and a statement of purpose. They're relatively similar, but usually a statement of purpose focuses more on why you want to pursue the program, whereas a personal statement is a little bit more personal. So that's just like the very fine distinction there. The main thing is just going to be making sure that you read the instructions very carefully, that you make sure that you're following all the instructions and are following the prompt, etc. So as long as you are following the instructions to a T and everything like that, you should be good. So I think the first step when it comes to starting to sit down and write your personal statement is just sort of reflecting on why you're pursuing the program, why you're pursuing the degree, and just sort of really having a sit down with yourself about what your why is, because that's what your personal statement or your statement of purpose is supposed to show. It's supposed to show you as a person and your passion for the program and for the field that you're applying for. So something that can help with this, because I think it's really hard sometimes to write about ourselves and to reflect in that way. And so I find that something that helps with this is if you sit down and you talk to friends and family about sort of what they have seen you get really excited about on your path there. Because I think those moments that you've been super excited about this path that you're on and this goal that you're pursuing, those moments that your friends and family and those closest to you have seen you really excited about it, those are probably the big moments that have drawn you and solidified your plan. And so that can be kind of helpful if you're sort of at a loss of, what experiences you want to mention, what you really want to focus on in your essay, and all that kind of stuff. So I think friends and family are a big help when it comes to personal statements, not only at this step, but also in the editing step later on. So definitely enlist some people closest to you, because you really want to make sure that your personal statement's reflecting who you are. And I think the people closest to you can help you make sure that you're doing that. So my second main tip is to make sure that you aren't being too stiff and that you're being really authentic and a little bit vulnerable. It's called a personal statement for a reason. It's supposed to be a little bit personal. This was something that I ended up scrapping my entire personal statement for my MPH program when I was applying to MPH programs. The first one I wrote was just super impersonal, and it was very just focused on like my achievements and what I had done and the research I had done and things like that. And I had someone, a really close friend in my research lab, read over my personal statement, and he was like, yeah, it's good, I just don't think it's you. And so I scrapped the whole thing and I rewrote it. And I think the thing that kind of gets lost sometimes when you're writing your personal statement is you do want to talk about the things you've done and some of your achievements and things like that, but you want to do it in a lens of why those things have brought you here, not just like, hey, look at all these great things I did, because they can see that in your resume, they can see that in your experiences if you have to write them out in your application. So that's already getting across. What you want to get across is what they can't see on your resume or what they can't see on your transcripts, which is the why of those things and how those things have all come together like a puzzle to create this foundation for your career or for your furthering education. So on a similar note, I think that you definitely don't want to try to come across as someone that you're not. You don't want to try to just tell the admissions committee what you think they want to hear. You don't want to invest in a thesaurus and use words you wouldn't normally use. You don't want to over exaggerate certain things. You just want to be you. You want to be authentic. And if the personal statement and the way that you talked about something or what you included doesn't vibe with an admissions committee, then their program probably wouldn't have vibed with you. So, I mean, definitely don't try to fit into some mold that you think you're supposed to fit into. Just be yourself, write how you would normally write. Obviously, you do still want to keep it relevant and professional to a certain extent. You want to make sure that you're acknowledging the etiquette of the situation, I guess. You don't want to be too informal in your writing, but you can be personal and be a little bit vulnerable and still keep the tone of the writing professional. And so I think that's also something to keep in mind as you're reading back through. I recommend just sort of brain dumping onto the page and then going back through later and kind of figuring out how you can tweak things to like fit into some of these things that we're talking about. And so I mentioned, being personal but relevant. And so like I've sort of touched on, you want to pick a few experiences depending on the word count. You want to pick a few experiences that have really contributed to this path that you're on and sort of think about what was super meaningful about those experiences and what was like that big emotional like aha moment for you in certain things. And maybe you don't have one, but I'm sure you have times in various experiences where something was really meaningful to you. So for example, I wrote about this in my bioethics personal statement, and when I was working at the pharmaceutical company, it was, we worked with children with rare diseases, with rare neurological diseases, and these kids had seizures 15 times in a minute. And hearing parents talk about that and hearing how our company could help, how bringing certain drugs to market could help, hearing about some of the struggles that they had faced like legally as far as taking certain drugs over state lines and things like that. That was like a really big moment for me during my time working at that company. And so when I was talking about my experience working there, that was what I talked about. And so you can make it relevant. I was working in this pharmaceutical company doing patient engagement and things like that, which was a great experience for me to like have on my resume for applying to bioethics programs. But I wasn't just like, hey, I did this XYZ and like talked about, projects I worked on or whatever. I talked about how working in that company and hearing those stories drew me to want to pursue bioethics and like has made me hopefully a better bioethicist. So that's sort of what I mean when I say keep it relevant, but keep it personal. So you're talking about like those big moments in this relevant thing, if that makes sense. Hope it does. So this last sort of topic is kind of a tough one. People ask a lot if they should talk about any like shortcomings in their personal statement. I think that in the end, it's up to you. But I would say that if you do, keep it short and keep it focused on how you have grown from that experience and not focus on excuses or reasons or nitty-gritty details. Just a very short recognition of whatever it is usually sufficient, and the school can ask for more information if they'd like it. For example, if you're applying to medical school, they will, a lot of times in secondaries, they will have a specific question, like essay question about, if you have any bad grades that you'd like to explain further, please do so here. So you don't really need to focus on that a lot in your personal statement. A lot of times too, the reason I would just say proceed with caution is because what you may view as a shortcoming, they may not. And so then you've just drawn a bunch of attention to the 1C that you got in Orgo in undergrad, and like they probably wouldn't have cared as much. And so that's why I think it doesn't necessarily need to be in your personal statement unless it's something major. There's some pros and cons with it. So like I said, at the end, I think it's a personal decision, but if you do, just keep it short and simple and focus on your growth instead of excuses and explanations. And the very last tip is if you are not submitting through a common app, so in other words, if you can submit different personal statements to different programs. So if you're applying to public health school, SOFAS allows you to submit different personal statements to each school. If you're applying to medical school, you submit one big personal statement and then you customize it in your secondaries. But if you can send personalized personal statements per school, then I recommend pulling up the school's like mission statement and pulling some keywords from there to talk about why you really, really want this school specifically. And I think that's really helpful that goes for the same for cover letters, for job applications and things like that. You want to make sure that you're coming across as if you have researched the school, the program, and that you really want to be at that program specifically, like we've already talked about. So after doing all of that, edit, pick it up, put it down, look at it, read it all over a million times, have everybody read it. You want to make sure that you definitely don't have any like big grammatical or spelling errors or anything like that. You could also use things like Grammarly and stuff like that to run your personal statement through, just to make sure that you have the most pristine written document ever. And having friends and family proofread it can also be helpful to sort of tell you if you have done a good job expressing how great of a person you are. So I have put together a small little like worksheet, I guess, and I have linked that down below in the description to sort of help you think through some of the personal statement thoughts that you might want to have. I know that with some time and research and edits that you all will have amazing personal statements. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them down below, message them to me on Instagram. And if you are excited to see next week's video on extracurriculars and what sort of things get you into grad schools, then be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so that you don't miss it. And I will see you guys for that next week. Bye. I just want me to find it, 'cause I'm not